Hey Eddie,
Hello.
how's it going?
Going good. Going good.
All
Glad to be
right.
here.
Yeah, no, same. I was just gonna do a real brief description. So, you and I have been talking off and on over the years now. Is that right? I don't even know how we met exactly, but with a shared enthusiasm for practical applications of our own mindfulness practice. So we were getting ready to have a conversation, and I said, why don't we pause that and record it and see if it's of interest to other people? So I feel like it's really low key. Let's just experiment and see. But you brought up a quote, which is like my kind of quote. I think it's Sam Harris,
Yeah,
right?
Sam Harris.
About pessimism or about no, we're wondering, is this a pessimistic framing? It's this idea that um instead of thinking of meditation as relaxation or peacefulness, it's almost like you're training for the worst day ever. I think it's something like what he said, right? Is that how you recall it?
Yeah, yeah. He said meditation is preparation for the worst day of your life.
And I think what I love about it is it rings so true, and it's also like it sounds horrible. It's like sounds like the worst possible marketing. And I'm always finding like, how do I promote mindfulness, which I think is so liberating, but in the marketplace, it sounds so different than what I practice. It sounds so flat and quiet. And anyway, so um, I thought we could start, and I don't know if we've actually had this conversation, but do you remember what you thought mindfulness was going to be about when you started? You probably didn't think. I hope it's preparing for the worst
Yeah,
day.
that's why it's hard to pinpoint the beginning point, right? Of when I got
I
into
know.
it. Like,
Uh,
was it I think it was a decade more, I think.
mm,
Um, I would say it had some sort of stress reduction yearning, I suppose, without necessarily knowing what mindfulness-based stress reduction even is. I think
yeah.
that was the yearning, probably to, this is pre even understanding I had an ADHD brain, some sort of way of like lassoing,
Mm,
the wild horse of my consciousness. I think that's what my initial, but
yeah.
now I think the more I do it, it's I use a lot of metaphors to describe things. I think metaphors help me understand things, but I think it's more now less stress reduction, although that is a natural byproduct of doing it, but that's not the purpose. I would describe it more between like when you watch television, the difference between standard definition and high definition.
Mhm, mhm,
With
mhm,
high definition, what is it? The colors are more
mm,
rich. The
mm.
detail is more, you can see the pixelations with greater texture and clarity. And I feel like that is
Mm.
the what I like about it. It makes life HD, you know.
Yeah, no, totally. No, I love it. And I would say maybe that partly relates to this topic because that makes all of life sharper, more. It's not just pleasant stuff. So
No.
you kind of have to contend with the reality that is you're inviting a richness that cuts across what we might consider pleasant, unpleasant, right? And that
Yeah.
and I think going back, if I really condense my exploration down, because I would say when I was much younger, I was reading books about meditation very broadly, but I was coming from a fundamentalist Christian background. So there was like a unease or like this was supposed to be dangerous. That was my earliest memory of thinking, why would relaxation be dangerous? And then maybe there's something more. But then more recently, after working 10 years in the mental health field, um, I kind of had this realization that I was putting so much emphasis on taking care of other people, and that was showing up in my personal life as well. But putting all my attention on other people and their needs and a helper
Mm.
and I was looking for this is had proved to be not sustainable. It's a big story, but I was looking for, okay, so if I have to take care of myself, where do I even start? And I kind of naively stepped into a yoga class, which was really, looking back, a mindfulness class using yoga postures, which I feel so lucky. And then fast forward, and that was like mid 90s, fast forward a few years, and I went naive. It's a theme for me, naive. Um, Went on a silent meditation retreat thinking it would be relaxing. So I do remember thinking, relax, calm down, get some perspective, maybe regulate my emotions. I didn't even know, I don't think I even knew that I needed that. It was more like, how do I even know what I feel and want and need? Yeah, this might be, I don't know if this is for the context of this conversation, but I remember thinking, as a helper, I'm really in touch with my feelings. And now I look back on that and I feel like, oh no, no, I wasn't in touch with my feelings. My behavior was kind of driven by really intense feelings. I
Mm.
guess you could say they were high definition, but they were very, I was tangled up. I was swimming in feelings. I was reacting to feelings. So anyway, I think I hoped I would get some relief from myself, the ways I was making my life harder, and how I was avoiding my own needs. Maybe there was a tool here for me, or tools here for me for that. So um yeah, so then stress, paying attention, whatever. What, like, let's play with this idea. Is this a pessimistic notion, or is this a downer perspective to say meditation is preparing me, or could be thought of as preparation for my worst possible day? How how does that land with you, or what do you
I don't know why I'm smiling right now, but I can only speak to like what happens now on my worst days.
Hmm.
And what happens now on my worst days is instantly it's this almost enthusiasm to see how meditation is going to emerge.
Well,
Like there's it's the result of meditating for that long is now it's like this richness of wanting to understand like a game, right? You know,
mm,
playing, let's say you're an elite basketball player and you're in the final quarter of the championship. Is that basketballer experiencing suffering? Well, yes, because there's stress, there's pressure to
mm,
perform. Like physiologically, it's under a lot of stress, right? It's kind of
right.
suffering. But the basketball, there's this context of play. It's the
Mm.
concept of reward. It's like it's it's beautiful suffering, right?
Yeah,
So in the same
yeah.
way, that's how I feel about suffering. It's like when suffering happens, this is the opportunity to see the edges of how I flow with life in the game.
So what I want to ask you is, you used the word instantly, which really caught my attention, because I don't know if I would say that my enthusiasm is instant. When you say instantly, how how do you catch that this is like there's suffering or misery starting to happen? How do you notice? And is it
Mm.
instant?
No, I think the instant is my enthusiasm
Oh,
that this suffering has value.
okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
which
Yeah,
kind of changes its dynamic. Like it still sucks. The worst days still suck, but there's this underlying like this is this is an opportunity to dance in the game and
right.
discover stuff. Like I'm no longer in like battle with it.
Okay. And would you say that's like, if you think of the analogy of the athlete, the basketball
Yeah.
player, that makes so much sense, because it's like, that's one thing to be having, the stakes are high, the
Yeah.
pressure is on, I'm kind of drained. I really want to win, but if I try too hard to win, I might screw it up. But yet there's also some implication that, okay, wait a second, I'm bringing to this my body, my nervous system, my training, my tools,
Yes.
my train like honed instincts. So there, that enthusiasm is like, it's not like I would choose this big challenge, but here we are, and I feel more equipped than I ever have before to respond to that. That's kind of the enthusiasm I
Yeah.
kind of relate to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's the joy of seeing how you will perform under this, because that's when your meditation practice kind of you sometimes you see the result of your
Mm,
meditation practice, you know. The
yeah.
the other thing I would like to say about why is maybe I've discussed this and maybe this is a tangent, but like meditation to me feels like brushing my teeth now. Like I just have to
Mm-hmm.
do it. Like you brush
Mm-hmm.
your teeth every day. Why?
Mm-hmm.
Because it gets on there and you feel clean when you
Mm-hmm.
brush your teeth. What
Totally.
right? In the same way, meditation is like I need to meditate to brush my brain.
Yeah.
So
Totally.
the
No, it's
difference
totally
between
related.
yeah, right?
Yeah.
But the difference
Yeah.
between not brushing your brain and brushing your brain, it feels quite significant now, you know?
Okay. Now, if somebody said though, if someone's starting out and they go, I saw in the grocery store there was a magazine of this woman who looked really peaceful doing mindfulness. And I saw this book and it said relaxation, it said this and that. And so if I'm going to brush my teeth every day for this project, I see things being framed as relaxation. So I'm going to close my eyes, and even though no mindfulness teacher ever that I've ever heard of says clear your mind, everybody tries to clear their mind, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But if someone were to set themselves up for this is going to be the most relaxing day ever, I think this is actually why the quote is genius. It's because it's paradoxical. If I set
Mm.
myself up, today might be my best day ever, and I'm gonna not be angry, or I'm not gonna be rattled. Nothing's gonna push my buttons. And if I meditate enough, then I won't have to feel that discomfort. I'll just feel relaxed. To me, that's a recipe for heartbreak. You're going to be disappointed and say this doesn't work because but if I say something inevitably will challenge me today, physically, so I'm going to be uncomfortable, confused, uncertain, and whatever, to various degrees every day. So it's almost like the inevitability of that is when you're
Mm.
say you're brushing your teeth. I think it's the same. Okay, let's get ready. Not pessimistically, this day could be terrible, but being alive involves discomfort. So I'm brushing my teeth to prepare for that. Does that seem
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And so okay, so I'm thinking about you realize you're starting to suffer. And I think you and I both have the same kind of framework because we've been influenced by some of the same teachers. But in my mind, one of the first things I think of is there's a distinction between suffering and discomfort. And so I start to untangle. Um, I have a history of making my suffering escalate, making myself miserable, starting with the same maybe emotional discomfort. I can make it miserable for a long time. Um, so I like to think about this idea of what's the difference between the discomfort I'm feeling and what we're calling suffering. And I don't know, how do you back into it that way? Like, uh-oh, this I'm starting to escalate myself. I'm starting to suffer. How do you frame even starting to respond?
Mm. Ooh, great questions. Um, I'm not sure. Nothing's coming to me right now. I do have an answer. Yeah.
It's a tricky one. Well, and
Yeah.
partly I think even just saying, uh-oh, something's up here. It's almost like before I get enthusiastic about how I'm going to respond to it, there is something about what's the part I can focus on. So this to me, to say there's discomfort and then there's this suffering or misery. And I can say, okay, wait, can I, what is it going to take for me to get more acquainted with the discomfort
Mm.
before it escalates,
Before it
or
turns into suffering. Yeah. Yeah.
before, or maybe it already has, and I'm still trying to untangle it a bit. I don't know. While you're also thinking about how you unpack that, I sort of think about, I can kind of tell I have certain categories
Mm.
of this, and it's like, I don't know. I had this perspective a while back where, let's say, if I had a cold symptom, I'm starting to sniffle and getting a sore throat. It's not like I think, oh, if I pay close attention to my sniffle, I won't have a cold. It's more like, uh-oh, um, there's something on board. It looks like I'm getting sick, and
Mm.
sickness will run its course in its own time. I don't dictate the length of a cold. And in fact, I would not say I have 2 days to be sick and then I'll go back to my life. It's like, I can fight with nature, or I can go along with how long does this cold play out in my body. And so for some reason, that analogy, if I think, okay, if an emotion has come on board that feels like it's starting to be, my habit is leading to it escalating, sometimes I realize this is the kind of emotion that might be hanging around for a couple days, and I don't get to predict when it dissipates.
Yeah.
So
Right.
then that's where I start to get enthusiastic. Like, I know I've done this before, and I know I can start small. In fact, for me, if I can scale down and say, how can I show some kind of hospitality for this while it's
Mm.
running its course? I don't know if that
Oh, I
resonates with you, but
love that.
mm,
Hospitality towards your um,
mm.
discomfort. Oh, that is, wow. That that is chef's kiss, baby. Yeah.
Well,
So,
and
yeah.
I go ahead. Yeah, you go ahead. You say something more.
Oh, just as you were talking, my consciousness was riffing with yours, and just perhaps like that you just distinguish between suffering and discomfort, but perhaps I just put it under the banner of suffering, and to
Okay.
use Shinzen's analogy, right? The micro suffering and
Mm,
the depth suffering and anything in between, right? Um,
mhm.
um, and so like observing the the sufferings at the top stages of the soil, before
Mm,
they go to the bottom root system, where that's where
okay.
the where it can get even more intense. Um,
How
I
can
just
you
sort
think
of
of a
these
way?
words
How do you put?
emerging about the spectrum, like a spectrum
Uh,
of intensity, and
yeah.
mindfulness is like allowing yourself to look at the early. I love how
Mm,
Shinzen Young talks about like noting and its use of like micro suffering, and how when you can observe that, it allows the flow to sort of move through you, and then that
oh yeah,
allows flow
yeah.
to happen in all contexts.
Well, and what I hear there is there's this habitual resistance to discomfort that I would say most people are not aware they're bringing to this challenge, right? And I think that is one of the things when you're saying, you know, the marathon runner has trained over months and like, oh, I recognize this, so there's that familiarity. um so one thing, and I think we're talking about long game here, like it takes a long time to realize, oh, I'm resisting some discomfort here, and I'm sort of like, is there something I can do to back off that resistance even a little bit? One thing I was going to say is, when you were talking, there is a
Mm,
difference between these like little, mm, these discomforts that just inevitably ripple through an ordinary day, you
mm,
know? And then there's the ones that are like, you wake up and you're like, I don't really want to do this day, or I've signed up to do something in 2 or 3 days, and I'm sort of dreading it or I'm anticipating it. Like there's a like you said, there's different intensity levels, and there's also different. To me, it's something like, I'm trying to give a example. Um, Out in the world of like customer service, I sometimes practice using. I feel like there's so many examples of feeling like somebody didn't make eye contact with me, or I'm taking a walk in the park and I say hi and they don't say hi back. There's these little micro, tiny
Mm,
little things that in the big picture don't matter, but they can start to stack up on inside me. So I kind of play with those because I'm not as quickly tangled up in them. I can sort of
mm,
like let that, can I just feel a little sad? It's not sad conceptually, it's just a little sad almost physically. Um, and just go ahead and feel it and move on. Whereas something like I wake up and I'm anxious or I'm dreading something, it's a little bit of a different, it's a different degree, like you're saying, like you had the roots and the depths and things. But something, if it's like, if I have a personal investment, if I have risk embarrassment, or if my mood is just out of sync with the thing, it can be a really it can be a little more intimidating the more
mm.
intense that that emotional discomfort is. So I don't know how you think about that, but you mentioned shins and yang, so I'm always trying to dice, like I'm trying to untangle this thing. If it's just a nebulous, um, intimidating fog of dread, I'm in trouble. But if I go, okay, let's see here. How can I break this down? How's my energy level?
Mm.
How's my mood? Am I feeling like, does it feel like my emotional reaction is complicated, or is it like one dominant emotional flavor? These are the kind of questions I kind of start to ask myself in that. And I don't know if that's how you pick it apart. Um,
I just share a reflection that's coming to me in the moment, like a practical. So I work nights packing boxes at a supermarket, and so yesterday I meditated before the shift,
mm,
um, just for 10 minutes. So quick one. Did a breathing practice. Went in there. Was I mindful, like aware that I was being mindful during the shift? Sometimes I am. I'm actually noting and like fully aware that oh, here's a customer looked at me the wrong way. Oh, that triggered. But sometimes I'm actually kind of not like so-called mindful. However,
yeah.
I do think it's sort of like, to use a kind of river analogy, or like it's almost like the rocks of my consciousness are placed in such a way that the
Mm,
river flows.
mm,
So like there was a
mm-hmm,
few things that irritated me. I wasn't realizing I was doing mindfulness, but it's almost like it's passed through me a lot quicker. So I can
mm-hmm.
show up today just when I say I'm good, I'm good. I didn't let the blockages from yesterday's shift, last night's shift, like,
Yeah.
but I wasn't
To-
mindful last night. Well, I guess I was mindful, but I wasn't really aware. Does that make sense? I wasn't
yeah,
aware that I
totally.
was doing it, you know?
Well, yeah, this is like one of the most important things I never hear talked about, because I think most of the time people are like, treat mindfulness as, in case of break glass in case of emergency. I'll wait until I need it and then I'll try it. I'll pull out my app and see if I can calm myself down. But what you're talking about to me is what's the real potential, exciting, empowering, liberating stuff, which is, it's like, if someone goes to the gym and does strength training consistently for weeks, months, years, then are they strong? like like an analogy I've given before is like, if you ask me, you say, I'm gonna get ready to move and I need help, I need people help move furniture. And I say, well, I'll help you, but I need to go to the gym real quick and lift weights so I can get stronger because I'm not really
Yeah.
strong enough to help you with that. But it's
Yeah.
like it's too late. It's too late. If I'm not strong enough, I can't help.
Mm.
Um, so this is actually kind of related to that idea. We're preparing for the worst day, or let's say we're preparing for challenging days. And I could not agree with you more. The work I've done before, it's not like I'm going through the whole day trying to maintain a sort of
Sure.
mindful focus. It's more like I'm relying on um, my habits and the exercises, the challenges I've already put I'm giving myself little challenges all along the way, and then I'm just letting my attention skills help. Um, yeah, it's not like I'm consciously thinking of it any more than someone who is physically strong has to be conscious of their
Yeah.
strength. They've
Yeah.
already invested in it, right?
Yeah. It's not like the guys on strength training when they pick up a box, they're going, "I'm doing strength training now." Like
Exactly, exactly
the
right.
effect of strength training. No, they're just using their strength. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
it's funny because like in the mindful, when they're trying to validate mindfulness in the research, I've been
Yeah.
part of a couple studies and they'll say, okay, be mindful now or don't be mindful now. And I'm like, it's what you're saying. Like it doesn't work it doesn't really work that way. The other thing, and I feel like it's worth saying to someone listening to this is like for clarification, just because I'm training doesn't mean it's going to go well every time either. I feel like I'm
Yeah.
playing a very long game of I want to like the trend of improving my response to challenge, not that I have to nail everyone. You know, we an athlete, your basketball example, doesn't mean they nail it or that they win every game. It's that they're positioning themselves to increase the odds, I guess, right?
Yes.
Um, I feel like that's worth noting, but I just what
Mm.
I love about this conversation is I don't think we talk in much nuance most of the time about this as a attentional trait changing. Like I'm equipping myself before I need it.
Mm.
Um, and that when I do consciously employ it, like I feel like you would probably agree, you might be going along for a shift and you might be several hours in, and then something happens, and you're kind of like, oh, this is kind of like bigger challenge. Okay, what do I got? What do I have to work with to respond to this? And you're
Yes.
prepared to pull one of those out. Um, and that, I don't know, for me, it's not usually trying to get myself to relax. It's
No.
paradoxically more like, okay, wait, is this anger? Is this embarrassment? Is this sadness? Like, what's the do I not even? Maybe I don't even know. It's like, ugh, I feel ugh. Like first, I would in my preference is usually to first get a sense of like which of my big contenders for emotions that are like the ones that throw me the big challenges. Which is on board here? Which might be on board here?
Mm.
Um, I usually start there, then I would maybe go for something like I feel like it's really important to realize I'm not white knuckle. Let's say it's embarrassment. Embarrassment is one of my favorites because I have so much embarrassment in part of a normal day-to-day life, just like little vulnerabilities of being alive. Um, Nothing dramatic, just little things that are there. And so if I'm like, oh, this feels like this is when my body when I'm embarrassed, it feels like this. So sometimes I can say the intensity level is not so strong that I might notice. I feel it in my face, something like this. Or or it might be a situation where I want to focus on some other sensory perception besides the emotion itself. Because there's a couple different ways. I feel like I'm deliberately trying a couple things to see in this circumstance what might be the most useful response to actively engage in a mindful deconstruction
Mm.
of what's happening. I don't know. That doesn't sound too abstract. I always like. is the sound, I don't want it to sound abstract because in practice it feels so tangible. Is that
Mm.
how you do you think about how do you think about that?
Sounds so tangible to me. And I understand that, we're practitioners in the
Right,
details. So it's hard to sort of s- go, it's hard to go outside looking in when we're inside.
right. Yeah, that's true.
Um, it's sort of like it's how do we do, yeah. Maybe what do I feel called to share? Um, like I think for me now, when a activation happens, I tend to shy away from the term triggering because that has so
Uh-huh.
much connotation around it. I like activation because it encompasses both positive and negative.
Mm,
Like
okay.
it kind of, because sometimes the two happen at the same time, or they
Mhm,
can
mhm,
change quickly. So when I have an activation now, because of mindfulness training, I think my default is wanting to lean into it.
mhm,
Um, I think I've had enough reps, you know, that in real life, in the messiness of life, where leaning into it has
mm,
led to it shifting or
mhm,
um, Shinzen Young uses his nerdy term of purification, but that can sound too nerdy. So I would maybe perhaps as a translation just use a term like flow through you
mm.
and turn into like insight that's underneath it.
Like,
Um,
if my words might be something like, I'm calibrating my reaction so that I can still I think it's the same thing you're saying. I'm kinda I'm t there's a vitality in it, but if
mm,
I choke it off, if I resist it, I miss the vitality. You know what, a good example would be, like, public speaking.
yep.
I find that some of the best engagement is when I feel really vulnerable, but I'm not resisting the vulnerability in such a way that the vulnerability is kind of keeping it juicy and human or something. And so
Yeah.
it's like, would I say, would I say I feel vulnerable? Absolutely. Would I say I'm collapsing? Absolutely not. But it's like, it's sort of like I'm willing to be vulnerable so that I can leverage that the emotional juice of that vulnerability
Mm,
seems to then connect with the audience better than if I have this like some intellectual point to make. If I let me explain the way the world works, blah blah blah, like break it down. But if it's like let me share a specific example from my own life, and I think is this too personal, right? You know, but then by by sharing some personal application, even if that feels vulnerable and it risks being misunderstood, sometimes that I can feel the the receptivity. I can feel the interest level increase. I
mm,
guess that's what I'm trying to describe in a concrete way. That thing you just said about purification. It's like whatever we want to call it, I can either resist and tangle up and even run the risk of identifying with my unpleasant emotions, which I think is the challenge. Like I don't. It's if I try not to be sad, I end up feeling like a sad person. If I'm
mm.
curious about my emotions, I realize, oh, I'm a person that can feel happy, sad, bored, lonely, excited. What it's right? It's something like this. It's
Yes.
like a
Yes.
the purification I think is like access to the full range of what a human can feel, including those intimidating feelings that um we tend to like, oh, I don't want that lesson. I don't want that feeling today. But so when you I'm gonna go back to this the when you're working, you said sometimes, and then it could be work or not work, but on an ordinary day, would you say sometimes there's a part of your day besides formal sitting practice that you would call um developing your mindful muscle or your mindful skills in preparation for challenge? Like, do you turn ordinary tasks into that ever?
Well, yeah, well, for the last, since I've been back doing night shift work, packing boxes, when I started again, one of my strong and like intents was, if I'm going to do this, I have to make it mindfulness practice. I don't want to just
Okay.
trade my time and attention for money, but I will
Mm.
change my mindfulness practice for money. That sounds
Mm.
good to me, you know?
Right.
I can
Right.
do that. Yeah, that's a
It's
good
also
value.
like a secret mission because I feel like you're not telling your
Exactly.
employer that that's what how you're right. It's like your
Yeah.
secret
Well, and it
mission.
puts my attention and
Mm.
consciousness like in my, yeah, ownership, I'm not
Yep,
like giving
totally.
it away. So that was empowering. And what I've done, because look, it's a shit job, but my intent was how can I make it training? So definitely more at the beginning, I would I would actually read my meditation books before the shift. I would write
Mm.
notes. I would read the manuals and I would go into the shift with that
Mm.
of training. Um, Now it just sort of is autopilot, I think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's
But
very
yeah,
impressive, I have to say. It's like an impressive example of oh God, it's like Shinzen Young says that not everyone will go to a monastery, not everyone will go to a silent retreat, but if we're honest with ourselves, I'm totally butchering his words, but if we're honest with ourselves, we admit that the challenge the monastery is not a spa vacation. The monastery is supposed to be a crucible for transformation and growth, and
mm,
it involves discomfort. We have it kind of, people will say I'm having a Zen moment. I'm like, are you though? You're having what popular culture calls a Zen moment, but a Zen moment might be full of confusion and uncertainty, mm, that's responded to with composure. Anyway, that's a whole thing. But the idea is the monastery will come for us whether we want it to or not, in heartbreak, grief, anxiety, boredom, the inability to control or fix a situation, the inability to let's say, remove political polarization from your country or whatever. I mean, there's a lot of opportunity. So what I hear is someone who has uh, monasticized, like turned their day-to-day challenge, some of their day-to-day challenge into that practice for growth, not
yes.
just in a cognitive way, but I hear that because I know probably I can imagine if I were to do something like what you're describing, it would be a very tangible practice of seeing
Oh,
moment by moment, tracking sounds and feelings
yeah,
and
that's what it
things.
is. That's what it is. Not every shift, not every shift. I'm not no perfect
Yeah,
meditator,
yeah.
In some shifts, look, like I said, it's just I'm not even aware I'm meditating, but I think there's that flow through that's going on. But some shifts, I think what you said before, right? Um, it's about increasing the frequency that you're gonna have a better game, and you don't have good games all the
Mm,
time. Yeah. And um I
yeah.
think in over a year and a bit, maybe I've had like a handful of games or rounds
Mm,
where literally for like 3 or 4 hours, I am just loving opening the boxes and like the
mm,
sound, so pleasurable, and just open and putting it's like
mm,
it's that feeling of when you play a game of Tetris and you're in
mm-hmm,
flow, it's so satisfying when the
mm.
blocks go in and the next blocks, and it's sort of that kind of sensation of like, oh my God, this feels like Tetris pleasure, like, you know
Right.
like,
No, my God, it's such a win. It's such a win.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I'm trying to think of a recent example where I've had that. I
yeah.
can't think of a recent one, but maybe more in like I'm taking up swimming later in life and it's full of challenges and sometimes I get into that. It's hard, but something I wanted to tease out something you've just said here about that Tetris flow. I don't know. To me, this idea that runner's high. I've trained
Yeah.
for a marathon and I've had what you're describing. I've had this thing, and it's like, it's something about the ordinary seems so boring.
Mm.
And my whatever stories I'm preoccupied with seems so riveting. And what you're describing is what I would consider a huge win that anyone would find um, satisfying, is that to somehow steer their attention out of what they assume is the most interesting thing into what seems to be dull, opening boxes and unpacking boxes, or repetition. Oh, I know what I was going to say. I read years ago something like Amazon, you know, there was, you think about if someone had said, "Hey, Eddie, we want you to be mindful and we're going to train you how to be mindful." Because I'm like, I'm not going to be, you can't make me be mindful, any more than you can make somebody eat broccoli or exercise. But like Amazon put up this like um, little phone booth thing so people could go do mindfulness in it, right? And then there was like guided exercises and stuff. And I'm thinking, number one, socially, you're going to be like an outcast if you go in that phone booth. Who
Yeah.
are you to take a break? And what are you doing in there? You're just taking a nap and whatever. And I thought, there's no way that I would even say the majority of your employees are going to take on what you just described, even though it would blow their minds. If you could
Mm.
imagine, I'm working at packing and unpacking boxes, but I've got some evidence-based tools for getting into a flow state while I do it, which doesn't mean I'm going to say I'm going to have any concern about like employee treatment or fairness or compensation. Let's put that to the side, right?
Mm.
But just this idea that a few minutes of my day or part of my time, if I decide I want to, could be honing attention skills that increase the odds of being in a flow state while I'm doing a repetitive job. I mean, it's complicated. We always lead with politics first and like, right? But what we're talking about is something I think underappreciated, undervalued. This idea that ordinary life has repetition in it, um,
Mm.
right? And is there a way to turn that repetition into some kind of richer life as opposed to more miserable life?
Mm.
It does not address all the political implications. I don't It's such a tricky conversation to have these days. But um boredom, waiting, navigating health insurance. I mean, there's just like waiting
Yeah.
in lines, other people, rude people, whether I can, there's so many things I can't control. And there's so many things in life that can be repetitious and monotonous that
Yeah.
even if we take some of those and turn them into mindfulness practice or whatever you want to call it. I don't know. I get excited about
Mm.
that.
Love it.
I don't
Love it. Love it.
uh,
Yeah, I'm sort of noticing now how like we're pulling. I think we're both doing this, or we're pulling from sport and like games and stuff. And what is it about those things? It's they're all in heightened state of mindfulness.
totally,
Like
totally.
it's the same thing. So it's like it's almost like meditation allows you to make your life more game-like in the sense
Hmm.
that and not game just as in playing, but that's those inner sensations that is kind of sometimes available in sports people, and why like I think sports people are often mindful, deep in mindfulness without even realizing that that's what they're
Or
doing,
totally.
right?
I think also because there's
And I like sports because it's translatable too, I think,
uh-huh, uh-huh,
it's
uh-huh.
understandable. People get it, or I don't know.
Well,
It's a better
but I think
bridge some.
it's also like there's something that if mindfulness is just something to understand intellectually, I don't to me it's not useful. And it's like you can't engage in a sport without putting in the repetitions or putting in the drills and showing up to practice. Like there's no way, like we talk about this in swimming. I talk about this a lot with somebody that you can get really bogged down in watching YouTube. Like I'm trying to learn how to do a flip turn right now, and it could be really easy to just read about it, watch flip turns, watch other people do it. But I know from where I am to being able to do one or to do it
Mm,
well, it's going to be a lot of water up my nose and a lot of feeling like an idiot and like, doing like breaking it down into chunks, first this chunk and that chunk. There's no substitute for doing it. So I think what part of what you were saying is there's no substitute for the embodied throwing yourself in, getting past all the learning stages. And I don't think people realize that mindfulness looks so passive, and you have to do it with your eyes closed, sitting still, and that you feel your breath and this and this. And it's like, oh, no, 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 wait, 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 wait. There's lots of options. There's a lot of sensory. You can do it standing. You can do it open-eyed. You can do it actively unpacking boxes or swimming. One of the things I play with swimming in general is I have a tendency that I'm swimming along and I'm starting to feel better. I'm like, oh, I think I'm getting somewhere, and I can quickly brace myself against how long can I sustain, like this is effort, how long can I sustain this? So I start to fast forward into not being able to sustain it in the middle of
mm,
being strong. And I feel like this is such a great, it points to my personality. As soon
mm,
as I make a little bit of progress, I'm jumping ahead and panicking about something that could happen in the future, which is undermining the thing I'm doing right now. Anyway, no, I think
mm,
that's just to say that I feel like your sports observation is right on. And to me, it points to what if people could start thinking about mindfulness as not a passive, altered state, numbing out, um, um, comfortable, peaceful, a peace that has no discomfort in it, and instead
yeah.
think of it as like training for an athletic event or musical event, artistic endeavors where you have to just keep showing up, keep showing up, keep showing up, yielding to the process, maybe.
Yes. Yes. Or
Yeah.
like let's call it, mindfulness is the activity or the training or the multi-level gym for
Yep.
this thing called the sport of life,
Oh
or
my
the
gosh. Yep.
yeah, yeah.
You got it. Yeah,
And
totally.
when you're playing the sport of life, you know, you get in flow. And so someone who's looking at you from the outside going, what is
Uh-huh.
happening here? I'm playing the sport of life, which I,
It doesn't,
which
yeah,
one tool I use is mindfulness. Yeah.
it doesn't make logical sense,
Yeah.
but it's experiential. I didn't mean to step on your words right there.
Yeah,
I
no,
got
no,
too
it's
excited.
experiential. That's what you said. Experiential sport of life, right?
Uh-huh. Well, and then to kind of bring it back to the original starting place, and I feel like maybe we can wind it down because I know you and I could talk about this a lot longer than people want to listen, but so what I never even thought of until just now, this idea of preparing for the worst day of your life, right? It would make sense to an athlete to prepare for the hardest challenge.
Yes.
It's not right. It's not that different. And
It-
then
It's the
the
same. It's
thing
the
is,
same.
it's the
It's the
same. It's the
same.
same.
Yeah.
But then the cool thing is, by preparing for the worst, you're setting the stage for the ordinary. This is like, this is what I think people want to just do a shortcut, just go to the ordinary, relaxation feels good. But by preparing for the worst or the most challenging, you're actually, don't you think, increasing the satisfaction from all the little pleasures that you do, and because it starts to all get folded in. It's almost like the savoring of the pleasant almost becomes like a byproduct of training for the
Yes.
challenging instead of the
Yes.
other way around. Yeah,
Yes.
which is a huge idea, that if true should be drawing a lot of attention. And I don't know, you know me, I'm like, why does this get reduced to soothing myself
Mm,
on demand when it's actually training? What, how did you say it? It's like training for the game of the experiential game of life with all its challenges. How does that get reduced to just relax? I get it. I
yeah.
think it's like
Sometimes I
there's
want to relax, but sometimes I
yeah,
don't. I want to like feel into its intensity and
yeah,
want to feel alive with what it is to be human, which is like I think I've said to you before, like, as an ADHD, I'm always going to have an electric, like
mm,
fiery brain body, and yielding into that rather than going, oh, I should be,
right,
not fiery and not eccentric and, but
right. But it's like,
rather
here's
than,
the material I've got to work with. Here's the nervous system I have. And
yeah,
it's like, so I get the idea that the appeal is exhale, relax, relax your face, rest your eyes. Yes, as a starting point to bring that to whatever you just, however you put it, like the electrical, um, frenetic, like it doesn't have
that's
to
my, yeah, yeah, that's my nature. So just,
not fight it, not
yeah,
not make it worse by expecting it not to be there, trying to get it away, numb it away. Like, okay, this is what I have to work with. Oh yeah, I think there's a lot here. I don't know, that excites me. The potential for more people to operationalize this idea. We have so many concepts, but to
mm,
actually, like, to take these metaphors and analogies and things and say, okay, wait, how would I begin to operationalize this idea of not fighting with my unpleasant moments? Because some days are going to require that I keep my composure. I guess I kind of want to wind down. I was thinking, I don't know if it's worth. Is there one last thought you had before we stop this?
um, no, I think we've covered I think this discovery that that has
Mm-hmm.
emerged in the last, 2 minutes of the sport of life and
Mm-hmm.
um
How would you, is there something you would ask or recommend if someone said, I do not know what you guys are talking about, but would there be one, like, I'm thinking of an experiment. Maybe I'll share mine and you,
yeah.
I feel like I'm doing that Twitter thing where you go, what's your favorite movie? I'll start,
Yeah.
like, um, but I one of the things that comes back to me the most from people is
Mm,
they'll say, because I have this thing where I'll say it, you could make a whole meditation practice. Could be your exclusive thing. Is to notice what you're feeling when you're feeling it. Take a stab at naming it. It's not that important to get it right. It's like starting to guess. It's like, oh, I think I feel tired. This is what it feels like to be tired. Oh, I think I'm a little embarrassed. This is what it feels like to be embarrassed. This is what it feels like to be frustrated, angry, impatient, right? And it doesn't sound like a great practice, but I think when it starts to become a habit, you're like, okay, wait, oh, um, I'm just exhausted, and you not only name it, but you take a minute to like sink into it. It's almost like I'm collecting data for my nervous system to kind of untangle. Like this,
yes.
hey, whoever's in here, this is exhaustion. Can we file this some meaningful way? I don't know how you guys do this, right? Um, but here's some raw data that seems to me like exhaustion, fear, anger, enthusiasm, laughter, being turned on, being bored. I'm like, just acknowledging this is my body has the capacity for these things.
Mm,
That starts to show up in these moments where I'm like, I remember one time some guy came, he had like just started a new job and he was really anxious about it. And then he came back and said, oh, I was like, this is what it feels like on the third day of my new job. It feels like this. you know
mm,
and it was like the fight with it just sort of dropped in a tangible way, and that is a really that practice itself, I think, could get people far enough to really get curious about mindfulness being beyond just calm
Mm.
down. So I don't know if that it triggers any last thoughts from you or not, but that's one I'd
I
like to
think
share with
maybe I'll
people.
go back to maybe what I said at the beginning, which is the difference between, and again, this is a metaphor, but I'll ground it experientially. It's the difference between standard definition and high definition.
Yeah.
And, high definition, you notice more details. When you're watching a high definition screen on a movie, it is more
Mm,
pleasurable to observe. Like to the eye, it's aesthetically more pleasing. So through mindfulness, which is just as simple as just like what you said, noting what's going through you, noting
mhm,
what's around you, it is
mhm,
building a high definition sensory object in your consciousness, which, like watching high definition screen, makes the
mhm.
experience more interesting,
Yep,
pleasurable, colorful, like, and
totally.
yeah, that's how I would maybe
In a way
try
that
to.
I would say, yeah, and in a way that I would say, in the same way you're like, okay, whoa, this movie is a different experience. I don't think people realize that life can feel
Yes.
uh, richer in a way that's tangible, not just something you're abstractly thinking about. But what you're describing is right. It's like I dare people to just prove this wrong,
Yeah.
prove Eddie wrong. Like go out and try to cultivate a little bit more higher definition, and just let yourself be surprised by how rich that can be. I think that's a great way to stop. But all right, I'm gonna hit
Great.
the stop button. Great to talk to
Great
you.
to talk to you. See you, everyone.